Good afternoon, and welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online. My name is Drew Clark. I am the editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. I am very excited to welcome all of you to this wonderful and special edition of Broadband Breakfast Live Online. Today, we're going to be talking about workforce development issues, which has become a really hot topic as we discuss the broadband build-out. And before giving more announcements and introducing all of our guests, I'm going to turn it over right away to our keynote address by Patrick Halley, who is the president and CEO of the Wireless Infrastructure Association. WIA represents more than 140 companies that develop, build, own, and operate the nation's wireless infrastructure. So with that, let me go ahead and turn it to you, Patrick, and we look forward to your remarks. We know you've got to go to the White House shortly, so we're really excited to hear what you have to say to us.
Thank you, Drew, very much for hosting this discussion and for assembling some great panelists who can really get into the details of what we're talking about. And the White House event that you just mentioned is actually on this very topic, on the Talent Pipeline initiative that they launched. So it's fitting that we're here today. So as you mentioned, I'm the CEO of the Wireless Infrastructure Association. We do represent the businesses that build, own, and operate our nation's wireless infrastructure. And in addition to our policy advocacy, WIA is very focused on solutions to ensure that we have a well-trained and robust workforce capable of meeting the broadband needs of today and tomorrow. It's an issue we started working on about 7 years ago, and one that we feel passionate about through our work on apprenticeship, training, and sector-based partnerships with government and academia, something you'll hear about today. So I'm thrilled to be speaking with you today on this topic at a really critical time in our nation's history. It's incumbent on all of us to step up our efforts to recruit, train, retrain, and maintain the workers that we need to continue building and operating the best broadband networks in the world. We need to think big, starting in our nation's middle and high schools and in our colleges and universities, showing future employees their potential broadband career pathway, and continuing that effort with existing employees in companies across the entire broadband ecosystem. So to help facilitate this discussion, I thought it would be important to just take a look back at when our country has been on the cusp of a major national infrastructure deployment effort. If you think about it, President Roosevelt signed the Rural Electrification Act in May of 1936, provided loans for the installation of electrical systems in rural areas, creating thousands of jobs through the Rural Electrification Administration. Crews, including teams of electricians, traveled nationwide, stringing thousands of miles of wire in areas that were literally in the dark before that. Provided electricity for farms and homes, which had a massive impact on rural America and frankly, all Americans. But imagine for a minute, if those crews of electricians and the other workers that were necessary to get that done weren't available. Almost 20 years later to the day, in 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 into law. It was a bill that allocated $26 billion to pay for a 41,000-mile national system of interstate and defense highways. Very similar to our current Infrastructure Act, it provided funds to state transportation agencies to then build those highways. Again, a huge and massive impact on the American way of life and our economy. Again, imagine if the workers that were necessary to build those highways weren't available to get the job done. This is unimaginable today, given the success of the electrification and the highway system. But those highway systems and those electrical systems did not build themselves. They required tens of thousands of workers to do the hard work of digging trenches, climbing poles, stringing wires, laying asphalt. And so here we are in November of 2022, nearly a year after the signing of the historic Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021, legislation that provided $65 billion to connect every American to high-speed broadband, including $42.5 billion through the Broadband Equality, Access, and Deployment Act, or the BEAD program. This kind of infrastructure investment has been called a once in a generation opportunity, and rightly so. But it's also important to remember that this federal investment is on top of $80 billion in annual private investment by broadband service providers. In fact, the wireless industry alone will invest over $40 billion just this year in private capital, an all-time high, as carriers build 5G networks on a national and regional scale, covering new areas and adding capacity to existing networks. So this combination of public and private investment in broadband infrastructure will have profound impacts on virtually every aspect of our lives and be a key driver of the US economy. We all know that. But like the roads and the electrical systems before them, broadband networks will not build themselves. They will be built, operated, maintained, and upgraded over time by a well-trained, highly skilled workforce of broadband industry professionals, tower climbers and technicians, fiber optic technicians and fiber splicers, RF engineers, overhead and underground utility installers, small cell technicians, trencher and heavy equipment operators, and many others. Which brings us to the topic of today's discussion. How can states sustain and expand the broadband workforce? I'm particularly excited to discuss workforce development measures at the state level because there's both a huge need and opportunity to invest in workforce training, with Federal Infrastructure Act dollars on top of existing federal and state programs. In fact, while it tends to receive a little bit less focus than other topics, states are actually required to include a detailed workforce development plan as part of their 5-year plan and as part of the deployment proposal and their initial BEAD proposals to NTIA. BEAD deployment funds can be used for workforce development efforts that include registered apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships and community college or vocational training for broadband-related occupations to support network deployment, maintenance, and upgrades. The panelists speaking today can provide more details on what these types of initiatives look like. For example, WIA serves as the Department of Labor's designated industry intermediary for registered apprenticeships in the telecommunications industry, working with companies to expand apprenticeships through the Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprenticeship Program, or TIRAP. WIA is pleased to be partnering with like-minded organizations like NATE, the Fiber Broadband Association, and PCCA, and 80 companies on this effort, with over 3,500 apprenticeships registered to date. BEAD deployment funds can also be used for programs known as sector-based partnerships, public-private partnerships at the state level that bring together relevant stakeholders from government, industry, and education to develop and promote workforce training programs. Eric Leach from Ohio, who you'll hear from today, can provide more details on what that looks like in Ohio. WIA is a proud partner in Ohio, serving as the industry intermediary for Ohio's broadband and 5G sector partnership, where we work with the Ohio State University. My mom went to Michigan, Eric. She would be unhappy with me talking about that. However, go blue, it's okay. Where we're working with Ohio State and other schools to bring together industry and academia to create industry-driven curricula of broadband and 5G technologies for the entire state. This is a really successful approach, and I hope you'll take a close listen to Eric's description of what they're doing in Ohio, where they have leadership and coordination from the governor's office, establishing a telecom sector partnership with our employers, with the education system, with the workforce development sector, and community leaders. I really encourage other states to take a close look at what Ohio is doing as you consider workforce development in your state. So when it comes to expanding broadband access and closing the digital divide, the bottom line for states is this: planning to meet workforce challenges is just as important as planning for what types of infrastructure you're going to deploy to get all of your communities connected. And workforce development needs to be treated as that level of a priority. States need to develop workforce programs and make their communities aware of these opportunities to meet the demand in the broadband industry, which will only increase with this massive amount of new funding. Connecting all Americans with high-speed broadband and continuing to upgrade existing networks is a big deal. And we need big solutions to ensure that we have the workforce in place that can get the job done today and in the future. WIA is focused on solutions to meet this challenge, and we look forward to working with our government and industry partners to chart a path forward to connect everyone, everywhere. Thank you, Drew, and I look forward to listening to the rest of the discussion.
Well, thank you, Patrick. You've really set the table for this discussion about workforce development issues, which is kind of, it's been something sort of always on the periphery, but now it's coming closer and closer to the center of the concerns that those in the broadband industry and space need to focus on. We, of course, at Broadband Breakfast believe in better broadband, better lives. To us, that means higher capacity fiber and wireless but also the way that that's used and deployed effectively. And so we do reporting every business day on these topics. We do these events every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time. And as I said earlier, we wanted to just kind of briefly, before I introduce the rest of our panelists, highlight some of the upcoming events. We are going to be speaking next Wednesday about our upcoming event, Digital Infrastructure Investment. That will take place on November 17th. So next week, we're going to be doing a preview session with the three moderators that will be, three plus myself, moderators that will be participating in the conference. They are the moderators, that is to say, Gabriella Novello of Communications Daily, David McGarry of Broadband Breakfast, and Christopher Mitchell of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and myself will be hearing from each of them next Wednesday as a preview of our conference. The following week, we're going to be hearing from individuals focused on how to value your fiber network. And the week following, we're going to be talking about developments and changes in the social media space. Obviously, lots has been in the news recently. One more quick word about digital infrastructure investment. We are really grateful to put out content through these events every Wednesday, and we're able to do that through the support of our sponsors. Our sponsors include Utopia Fiber, Broadband.money, Google Fiber, Broadband Now, Lightbox, Geo Partners LLC, Ookla, BroadbandToolkit.com, Michael Baker International, Pinpoint Capital Advisors, Bitstream Communications, Positron Access, the California Emerging Technology Fund, and we're very happy to welcome the Wireless Infrastructure Association as a sponsor as well. So thank you, Patrick, for being joint partners in this effort. So these programs that we do every week, obviously we make them available for free, and they're instantly available online. So the record for this week and all previous weeks is available on Broadband Breakfast. Our event on Thursday, the 17th, will be a paid event. We look forward to seeing many of you there. It will be at Clyde's of Gallery Place, and you'll get both breakfast and lunch by registering. You can find more information about that on our site. Well, without further ado, let me turn to each of our panelists today. Once again, we're very excited to hear from, next up will be Debbie Kish. Debbie is the Vice President of Research and Workforce Development for the Fiber Broadband Association. So we'll get to hear a little bit about like fiber versus wireless and what the issues and skills for training issues are. So we're so happy, Debbie, you can join us for that. Following Debbie, we'll hear from Deb Bennett, who is the Director of Apprenticeship, Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprentice Program. This is kind of how this all started. I began hearing this phrase TIRAP, the Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprentice Program at different events. And I kind of figured out, oh, that's something Wireless Infrastructure Association's working on. And so we're really excited to hear from Deb on the specifics of TIRAP, what that is, how that works. And again, jointly with that, we are so happy to have Eric Leach with us. Eric is the Deputy Director of the Ohio Governor's Office on Workforce Transformation. And Eric will be able to give the public sector perspective on this and what the issues that, the Ohio Governor's Office sees and is doing to address some of these workforce challenges. And then we will be really pleased to hear from our batting cleanup speaker, Kelly Dunn, who is the president and CEO of AmeriCrew. I've known Kelly for more than a decade and really excited to follow his career and particularly what he's doing with AmeriCrew, which is an entity that is really focused on bringing veterans into the broadband industry. And so I really look forward to all of these remarks. So let's go to each of you in turn. We'll turn it over to you, Debbie.
Thanks, Drew. I'm really happy to be here to talk about workforce development and what the FBA is doing and, the issue that we have across the industry. So I wanted to, I agree with all of Patrick's comments about how this is the most important years coming in financing from the government and spending across, broadband technologies, and how important it is. And, couldn't have said it any better about how it's not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity now. This is how we learn. This is how we live. This is, what we do on a day-to-day basis. I don't think anybody really lives life without touching the internet at some point. So because of the investment, we see fiber investments growing dramatically. So we have a partnership with RVA who does our forecast numbers, and the investment in fiber is growing so rapidly through 2025 that the need for fiber technicians is absolutely significant. One of the biggest challenges that we've had over the years is that fiber's a relatively young industry. It's about 35 or 40 years old. So what we have is a lack of keeping this occupation of a fiber optic technician sort of on the forefront with younger people. So what we have is a group of people, the majority of them are quote unquote aging out. I hate to use the words aging out, but unfortunately, these are people who are still working. They might be on the retirement path, but they're not retired yet. So we have a little bit of a chicken and egg thing here. So we have some fiber optic technician courses. FBA has developed one as well, but we have fiber optic tech courses out there. And for years, I think what was happening is contractors would basically be pulling people off the street and, saying, hey, you have a pulse. Let me teach you how to do this job. So unfortunately, that sort of led to maybe some shoddy workmanship, less pride in their work. And then on top of it, we still don't have the interest from high school students, middle school. We have to start way early. So we're doing a lot of things to help, bridge that gap and bring interest of this industry to young people, that there is a valid career here. My theories on how we sort of as an industry lost out to younger people to look at this as an occupation or look at telco as an occupation, I think largely, between four-year degrees, how people learn on things like YouTube, or, or the fact that technology in and of itself became so interesting to young people that a lot of them had gone to coding and building apps and things like that. So we sort of lost out to some technology things along the way, which is great because we like technology, but unfortunately, we still need bodies in fiber. So we recently did an example to look at how many route miles of fiber, should be built out or will be built out, that we're looking at through 2026, and it's around 900 million miles of fiber. And we've calculated based on the number of people per crew and, looked at the different contractor jobs and, the tasks between the people who are digging trenches or, they're putting up aerial fiber. We did some calculations, and by 2026, we're estimating about 205,000 people needed, jobs created to get these fiber build outs. Unfortunately, I think, some people think that it's a once and done, once we get fiber built out, then, we'll no longer need those jobs. So we need to make sure as an industry that this is a lifelong career. It's not a, you teach people how to do this job, they get the fiber built in, and then it goes away. There's all kinds of things along the way to keep fiber going and keep it up and running, maintenance, outside plant. There's still design that needs to be done. And when you think about, like, when I live in rural North Carolina, there's a lot of building going on here. So a lot of rural areas are starting to get more densely populated. These are all people who are going to be internet users. So all these people need fiber to the home. So again, about 205,000 jobs by 2026.
So thank you so much, Deb. We've got such a big panel. We're going to have to kind of move along to each, but we're gonna get to a discussion around this, and I definitely want to engage on these points, including questions. We encourage your questions both on Zoom and on the other platforms, so that our panelists can be watching them and come back to them. Let's turn now to you, Deb Bennett. Tell us a little bit about the TIRAP program.
You bet. Thank you. And Debbie, thank you for teeing up the conversation for me. WIA has been the national sponsor of TIRAP, or the Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprenticeship Program, since 2017. And our participation in the program actually predates that. We worked with building out an apprenticeship program prior to that as well. But we took on the role of national sponsor, which simply means we have a set of standards or operating program guidelines that are in place and recognized across all 50 states and territories. So we've got a leg up on the start because our operating procedures are in place. We've got 14 occupations that are approved to date, and we'll show you some information on that here shortly. And there we go. And we are competency-based, meaning we focus the apprentices' attention on building the skills and competencies, as opposed to sitting in the classroom and a time-based apprenticeship, memorizing information and knowledge, et cetera. We want them to get the skills they need and get an opportunity to practice. But what does that really look like on a greater scheme? What is registered apprenticeship at the heart of the program? So if you take a look at the next slide, you start to see what those components are. It's a paid job, but to Debbie's point, it leads to a career. So we're building occupations that are in demand, and we know that they're going to stand the test of time. So they support the industry over the long haul. It's got an on-the-job learning component, work-based learning as it's referred to, and a classroom component. So you're picking up the theory and the knowledge, and you're taking it on the job, and you're practicing and developing your craft. You have a mentor. So all of this is done with the oversight of a mentor. So to Debbie's point earlier, those individuals that are leaving us due to retirement, we're getting benefit of that knowledge now and getting an opportunity for the apprentice to learn that. And at the end of the program, when they have demonstrated full competence, they walk away with a certificate of completion from the Department of Labor. Why do our nearly 80 employers see the benefit? Why are they participating in? Well, we're going to talk about a lot of these elements here in the Q&A that's upcoming, but look at the top three. It's an opportunity to develop your workforce, your incumbent workers, as well as anyone new you're bringing on as an employee. It's flexible, so you can focus and add in training elements that support your scope of work or your business growth strategies. If you get an apprentice that's well-versed in installation techniques, rework goes down, that's an immediate improvement to your profitability and your bottom line. I think we'll get into some of these other elements on the slide as part of the conversation, but I really wanted to focus in on those top three. But how do employers adopt this? We recognize apprenticeship isn't something that's been routinely applied in the telecommunications space. That's done through WIA, as an example, through our role as an industry intermediary. So we've got apprenticeship expertise, we have industry expertise, and we're really focused on three goals, driving this assistance to our employers that register with the program. You get a quick start. You get to take advantage of all of our expertise and our networks that we can bring to bear and share with you. We really pride ourselves on a high level, high touch, one-on-one technical assistance that we provide to our employers free of charge. And we assist to the extent that we can with some of the administrative tasks that are associated with your registration. And overall, it's streamlining the administration over the course of your participation in the program. We've got a lot of tools and systems that we provide, already designed, already developed. You're not starting from scratch. So we're really pleased that we can operate and provide this level of service to our registered employers. The next slide will give you a little bit of a look at the occupations that we've developed so far. You can see we've in 2017, we got our start really with those occupations where you're working at height. So you see those pathways built out with a great deal of specificity. But I'm looking forward to working with Debbie and FBA. We're going to take that fiber optic technician and we're going to build out that career pathway together. We're going to leverage FBA's expertise and bring it to the table. I've got a broadband technician occupation pending approval with the Department of Labor right now. That's another one that's got an opportunity to grow. And those boxes you see in gray, those were all designed and developed with the assistance of PCCA. So we've been really able to demonstrate the power that these business industry associations, when they come together and work for the good of the industry, we're starting to recognize the benefit of what that looks like. So it's just a little glimpse of what we have working on right now. If you want, I think my time's up, Drew. If you want to hand it over to Eric, that would probably be a good spot. I do have one other slide, just really showed what the process looks like.
Go ahead and show us
for
that
getting
last slide.
started.
Go ahead and show us that last slide there. Is that
You
it?
bet.
Yeah.
That's it.
Great.
Everything kicks off with a very simple employer acceptance agreement. Once the employer that wants to participate is comfortable with the program requirements, we get the acceptance agreement signed. We schedule onboarding sessions. We get you acclimated to any systems and applications that we provide as part of your registration with TIRAP. We work with you to identify mentors and apprentices that you want to bring into the program and what that process might look like. Then we evaluate the training that you currently provide. We look for any gaps. We map that training to what the requirements are. And then we'll go out and help you find any supplemental training that may be required to close those gaps. So we think we've got a really nice approach and we provide it all at no charge to the employer.
Well, thank you very much, Deb. With your permission, we'd love to republish those slides there on the page for this event, along with other materials that we have on this URL, which I'll share shortly. Let's go ahead and hear from Eric. Tell us a little bit about the governor of Ohio's approach to workforce development.
Sure. Thank you, Drew. It's great to be with everyone today. I'm going to just talk through a little bit about what Ohio is doing in the broadband and 5G workforce space, how we started, where we've been, where we're at now, and where we're going. So during our last state operating budget in the spring of 2021, the governor, lieutenant governor, Governor DeWine, and Lieutenant Governor Husted were proposing over $250 million in state funding to expand broadband access in Ohio, because the pandemic kind of laid bare to our state leaders that, without high-speed internet, you're not able to, participate in the modern economy, healthcare, education systems. And so as the lieutenant governor talks about these things, we decided we needed to move forward as a state to invest in broadband infrastructure. And as part of that, the governor and lieutenant governor wanted to make sure that we had the workforce to physically build it out. And so we began, our team began an analysis on, do we have the workforce? If not, how do we get it? And so we worked with industry up and down the board. We engaged with WIA at the beginning. We engaged with Fiber Broadband Association, PCCA, NATE, et cetera, to learn more about the workforce challenges and what we needed to do to get the workforce that we needed. We also worked with the Brookings Institution, who put out a report about how federal investment can expand broadband access and the jobs that would be created. So we worked with Brookings to model out, how many jobs are going to be created in Ohio as a guiding star of the fill rate we're going to have to, fill jobs at. And for every $500 million in investment, it's about 1,250 direct jobs that are going to be created in order to build out the infrastructure. And then we worked with CTIA and used some of their data as far as 5G deployment goes, that, in Ohio, we're going to have about 107,000 jobs created this decade for 5G. 32,000 of them are in network deployment. So while we're expanding broadband infrastructure, we also have to realize that the cell carriers are also deploying 5G at the same time, and they have somewhat of an overlapping workforce. So our state decided to tackle both broadband infrastructure build out and 5G deployment together. And as we interviewed companies, associations, educational institutions. So, everything from vocational centers to community colleges to universities to unions, whether they're contractors or providers, what is the state's role in broadband deployment, and what should we be doing to move the needle? And so as we crafted our strategy, it really came down to three key pillars that we focused on, which is one, increasing broadband industry career awareness. So what we heard, not only from when we met with contractors or carriers or unions, was that individuals, students, dislocated workers, whoever they may be, don't realize that the telecommunications industry is a career path for them, and that it's more than just a job, and that they pay good wages. And so that was issue number one for us to deal with, which is how do we get Ohioans to know that this is an opportunity? So that's pillar one of our strategy, is increasing industry career awareness. Pillar number two is establishing and scaling education and training programs. So historically, telecom has typically done a lot of training in-house. It's not like manufacturing, where they've been working with community colleges for 50 years. And so we're basically starting from scratch. So what we've done, part of our strategy to establish and scale these programs, is to work with industry to identify curriculum. So we've partnered with everyone from the Wireless Infrastructure Association to NATE, to the Fiber Optic Association. We're working with the Fiber Broadband Association to bring their fiber program to Ohio. So what we're doing is working with industry to get the curriculum, to learn more about what are the types of instructors we need, and then working with our education sector to house and scale these programs so that we can feed industry. So what we're doing is trying to get like how manufacturing is now, which is where they're completely integrated with our training and education systems to produce talent. So that's our goal for establishing and scaling training programs. We have 11 total now, and we just launched the strategy in September of 2021. And so we're continuing to scale it, supporting our programs, making sure we're hitting enrollment numbers, and then working with the institutions and employers to create the talent pipelines. Because biggest challenge is you can create the programs, stand them up, have students going through them, but if the employers, the industry aren't connected to the institutions, then we have a handoff problem of individuals not being able to complete programs and then move into employment. So that's something we're very focused on, especially now that we have programs up and going. And then the third strategy is to tap into state and federal funding to finance everything. So what we want to do is use state and federal funding to make standing up programs less costly for institutions, but also to make sure all these programs are tied into our current funding for credentials and things of that nature, so that Ohioans can go through these trainings at low or no cost. So when we're starting new programs, we're making sure that we're adding everything to our in-demand jobs list so that they're eligible for WIOA training. We're adding them to our state credentialing list so that individuals, employers can reskill and upskill their workforce at no cost. We're adding it to programs where individuals who are unemployed or underemployed can go through training at no cost, and also for high school students to get exposure and credentialed at no cost, and the incentives go to the schools to encourage that. So that's what we're really focused on here in Ohio, is increasing industry career awareness, starting and scaling education and training programs, tapping into state and federal funding. So that's our strategy. But how do you implement the strategy? Because implementation is key here. And so for us, we decided to create a Ohio broadband and 5G sector partnership. We needed it anchored at a large, research institution that has the capabilities. And so Ohio State University won a $3 million GEAR grant that we had to house it, but we want it to be industry led. We don't want it to be focused on academia. We want it to be focused to industry. So as a requirement for that, it had to be led by an industry intermediary to lead the sector partnership, in which the Wireless Infrastructure Association won OSU's RFP for that. And then we have 27 sector partners that are made up of industry, education, and government. So FBA's on it. We've got PCCA, we've got NATE, we've got a handful of other associations, and then we've got our government partners and our educational partners so that we can come together through implementation. And we implement through what are called quarterly sprints. So each quarter we have a meeting, and each quarter we have a new implementation plan of immediate things we can get done over the next quarter. We report back to the sector partnership when that quarter completes. This is what we've completed. this is, this had problems, whatever it may be, get feedback, especially when we complete things, and then move on to the next sprint so that we're consistently able to hit metrics. And so this is what Ohio's focused in on. We're very passionate about it. Industry sector partnerships are a big kind of fabric of who we are. It's big in manufacturing, and the governor and lieutenant governor are very excited to get broadband, the broadband industry, the workers they need, because for us, selfishly, for the government's perspective, is we want the infrastructure built out so Ohioans have high-speed internet, but we also want 5G deployed so that our businesses can have a competitive advantage on having one of the first mature 5G networks in the country, especially as we're moving forward with mega projects such as Intel and electric vehicle battery plants and things of that nature. And so that's just kind of an overview why we think it's important. And the governor and lieutenant governor, it's their vision that we're executing. And for other states, if you're in another state, I highly recommend that if you want to move the needle on this, go to your governor's office. You need to get the buy-in of your state leadership in order to move agencies and other entities into the direction that it needs to go.
Absolutely. We're hearing that over and over. Governor's offices are going to be a key on broadband, from the state broadband deployment to the workforce training. And in the link on the Zoom discussion for this, as well as for the page for this event, you can see several articles, all of which cite Ohio, right? So you're clearly leading the charge, Eric, in your work in this regard. We are so excited that we also have Shane Matthews with us. He's the Director of Training and Development for Electricom LLC, which, and he brings a background in education and experiences in construction and lean manufacturing. Shane, if you'd be willing to tell it, minutes on Electricom's experience, and then after you, we're going to turn to Kelly to give his thoughts on this as we enter into a discussion with all of us here. So go ahead, Shane.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Drew. I will start off by building off of what Eric shared. I've spent the larger part of my career in manufacturing and have been, relatively new to this sector. And when I came into Electricom, we really looked at, what historically have we done for training and development? What have we done for recruiting? What have we done to get our employees on board and successful growth within the role once they're in the organization? And I think, Eric hit the nail on the head. It was a lot of, that's the way we've always done it, tribal knowledge. Hopefully you get lucky and send a new employee out with a mentor that's successful. That wasn't always the case. So shortly after coming on board with Electricom, we partnered with WIA and TIRAP, and we've seen a lot of success with it. We ran our first cohort, Deb can correct me, I'm sure, but about a year ago or so, we went relatively small. I think we had 8 apprentices sign up, and we approached it from a hiring an employee into an apprenticeship role. Of the 8, I think we have 7 on board a year later. So for our organization, that retention is much, much, much better than we historically have seen. The apprentices, the training, they spent about 5 weeks in Somerset getting the focus training. It was great because we could pull them out of the field. We could teach them what we needed them to learn. And we saw a lot of success with it. Again, small cohort, I think 8 students. We are growing. We're building upon it. I think about a month ago, we signed up our second group within TIRAP. We've got 41 apprentices lined up, and we've taken a little different approach to it now. So with Somerset being our partner community college that we're working with, initially we were looking at a 2-year degree program, and that's still in the works. I think there's still a need for that. But as we started scaling this, we scaled it more towards, the individuals we're bringing in are non-traditional students. They're students who don't want to spend a lot of time in the classroom. So what we said is, how can we scale this back, have that 2-year offering as an option, but how can we work to a certification program and ideally even a pre-apprenticeship program? And that's where we're going. So our next group of 41, we're looking at a certification program. We're going to front load the training at Somerset, get these students the training they need up front. We're actually even starting to break into some of the Somerset training with some training in-house. And speaking with Deb and her team, we realized that, the skills that the Department of Labor requires, don't have to necessarily be conducted at a community college. Somerset provides a gap, a gap fill for us. But we have individuals in this 41 that have got a lot of skills and have got some expertise that have been with crews for a year or two. So we're bringing them into the apprenticeship function, and we're going through and we're doing some job analysis, and we're signing them off on the skills they already have. So we're seeing a lot of different avenues to bring individuals into our organization. The apprenticeship model is working well for us. In fact, we're looking at potentially switching to any new, what we would traditionally call a groundsman position, coming in as an apprentice. It gives us a stronger handhold on what we're looking for in a skill set for these employees. So I want to talk a little bit now about the recruiting struggles we've seen. And I think anybody in any industry is facing that. And again, with recruiting non-traditional students, recruiting a blue collar workforce, I think, doing it the way we've always done it, the classic, I think it's Winston Churchill quote, it's not working. Going out to job boards, that it's not working. So we're looking at different ways to recruit. We're doing a lot of partnering with, we've partnered with Somerset with a recruiting event they had. We're partnering with local high schools. We're getting out to where we believe these blue collar individuals are. My son's one. My son, I've got 3 older daughters that went down the bachelor's degree path, and a son that's a blue collar employee, he's a welder. And so we're looking at that type of an atmosphere to recruit from. We've recently employed an equipment simulator. So when we show up at a high school with a heavy equipment simulator, it's not the traditional come to my booth and let me tell you what I can do. It's sit down, have an opportunity to sit on the piece of equipment and understand what a day in the life might look like for you in this role. Once we get these students in, we even do some in-house leadership development training. So we talk a lot about not come out and grab a shovel, climb a pole, but how can we develop you as an individual and provide you career growth? And I think that's part of the reason we've seen the incredible retainment in our first cohort of students. So again, a lot of focus now on career building, development opportunity, and recruiting outside of the norm. So don't have a lot to share on that.
We'll get to you. We'll have a good discussion here. So let's thank you for those remarks and for really framing the issue from the perspective of the applicant, right? The worker, right? The workforce development issues we're trying to address is focused on the worker. So let's turn now for our final speaker panelist, Kelly Dunn, CEO of AmeriCrew. Take it away.
Thanks, Drew. Hey, I'm thrilled to be here as well. Kelly Dunn, I've been working with TIRAP, and I was one of the founding board members of TIRAP, as well as working with FBA, 2 great organizations. And, just kind of like Shane said, that we're kind of where the rubber meets the road. So AmeriCrew is we believe, one of the nation's first national veteran workforce development companies that is really doing infrastructure projects. And the reason that's important is, we're veteran centric, but we really take transitioning military, underemployed veterans, National Guard and reservists, and get them through that first year or 2 of work experience. And the apprenticeship plan, compared to where we were 5 or 7 years ago, it's night and day. It's a fantastic template. We are part of the TIRAP, the launch, a national apprenticeship provider. Be willing to talk to any companies that are considering it from a real world example, how critical, important, and how it can be such a differentiator. But we take these young men and women through initial training through education partnerships, and then we employ them directly or with our partners anywhere from 6 to 24 months, and then they're ready for their career. So for those of us in the military, we that have a military background, it's kind of like your basic training, your advanced training, and then our goal is to get them to their permanent duty assignment. An example of one of our best partnerships is in Indiana, where statewide we've got an anchor partner, and every state we're in, we approach it as an E3 model, meaning engage, educate, and employ. And by doing this, we can take the skill sets, the training, the certifications on the front end, and in that experience is very hands-on training, and route them to the best fit. Then they go through the OJT apprenticeship stage, and then to get them to their permanent duty assignment, where they can have a career, raise a family, buy a house. And that's what's missing. And a lot of things about the veteran workforce is everyone loves the idea of hiring veterans, but as a veteran who transitioned twice, you really have to have that bridge. You have to have that transitionary experience, because you think about it, a lot of the veterans coming out today joined right out of high school. Many came from rural areas or inner city urban schools, et cetera. Their first work experience is the military. So in a way, they've got this experience where every boss they've had, whether NCO, sergeant, officer, et cetera, has had hours and hours and thousands of dollars to train them how to lead, manage, motivate teams of people. Flash forward, when they start in the civilian world, they're more than likely reporting to a foreman or supervisor who's never been formally trained, who is very production oriented and sees this new person as a burden and doesn't have the equipped training. Not that they're not great people, but they're very production focused. We are really developing an ecosystem and a platform to bridge that gap. And that's what's so critical about what we're doing. And it's amazing when you see the aha moment. And just to reiterate, and I'm going to keep my comments really brief because I don't want to get to the questions and answers, but you see that aha moment where you see that young man or woman at the training, learning the skill and realizing they just don't just have a job, they have a career and they see a future. And it is so powerful when you see that happen. And we do it every day and we see it all the time. And so we have the work in infrastructure and fiber, wireless and clean energy. We not only do the work, but we have partnerships where people go through the training and put them into the companies that we've kind of vetted and signed off on as they get them through this 12 and 24-month experience for apprenticeship or training. And so it's great to see for those of us that have been here in this space a long time, to see these people on this call talking about this. It's very exciting to me to see it, at the stage it is today. So with that, I'll stop and hand it back to Drew and hopefully get questions and answers.
Well, thank you for that, Kelly. And it's exciting to sort of see in concrete terms what AmeriCrew does to take a resource that maybe not be as traditional, right? The veteran resource, and figure out how to fit it and marry it to the broadband workforce. So I've got, let's call them two vectors of questions I'm going to put out here, and then let's hear people's reactions. Please keep your questions coming. We have some great questions, and I'm going to incorporate one by Jeff Little into these two vectors. One is the vector of wages and prices, supply and demand, which in some ways kind of a cynical view of the workforce development issue as well. There's a workforce issue because people aren't being paid enough, right? And so I want to know, like, how much of that is correct, how this current inflationary moment we're in, where inflation is so high, higher than it's been in decades, that how does that impact the job market for the types of jobs we're talking about here in this workforce, more kind of construction, blue collar, if you will. So the wage and price and inflation issue. And the second vector is education, right? And the match or mismatch between higher education and vocational training. And we heard some great talks from Eric and others, all Deb and Debbie, I think both touched on this, is how we make sure that, is kind of trying to get schools, universities, and community colleges to adapt to the workforce needs a lost cause. And so we have to kind of go around them, or is there still a lot of good things to be done by interacting with higher education to get their curriculum more focused on needs? So those are the kind of the two areas I want to talk about. Who would like to tackle them first? Yeah, Eric, go for it.
Yeah, so at least in Ohio, we have a very strong what we call career tech infrastructure, which is vocational training. So it's really finding the areas where the different educational sectors are the most productive. So for us in Ohio, we're focused when it comes to credentialing for the most part. So if it's short-term, certifications or credentials, we'll work with career tech, vocational schools, and community colleges, because that's what they're most apt to do. If it is more on the professional side, whether it's graduate certificates, degree programs, whatever it may be, then we're focused in on at the four-year level. But there's going to be a huge enrollment decline in 18 to 22-year-olds in about 5 to 6 years. It's a pretty massive decline. We'll see a lot of schools close across the country. So the higher ed system is going to be forced to adapt. And so when we're working with Ohio State, which is a large university, 60,000 students, we're starting to see them start to pivot a little bit more to credentialing and boot camps and things of that nature. So I think the time is now to start, if you're going to work with those institutions, to start those conversations so that you can pivot.
Let's stick on this education issue, like how we get, and others who'd like to weigh in on this point that Eric's made.
Yeah, Drew, I got one quick point is that we do exactly what Eric's saying is it's a blending of working with education partners where they're earn while you learn, going to school, getting a certification, getting an apprenticeship. And I think it's the employers themselves have to have flexibility as well. So when you can meet that person where they are, not only makes more productive employee, but for most part, we're non-traditional students, especially veterans that are entering the education sometimes 4 or 5 years out of high school. You have to come up with creative and different models. What's unique about the veterans is they've got GI Bill and other supplemental funding that they get additional income directly while they're working for us. So that helps in retention, wages, et cetera, while they're learning a skill or getting their 2-year or 4-year degree. So it's a flexibility of both the employer and the education partner to really be solving it together versus two competing separate entities.
This is Deb. I'll jump in on that too. With WIA, we've got a grant from the Department of Labor, and we've been working with 5 community colleges. State Technical College of Missouri. If you get a chance, I highly recommend you go out and check out their website, the program that they've developed. Terrace State Community College in Ohio, Northwood Technical Community College in Wisconsin, Monroe County Community College in Michigan is just getting started, and Somerset Community College that Shane referenced. What I have found in working with them is they're incredibly interested, and to the extent they can be flexible in what employers need. Well, what they need are regionally based employers. They need more than one in order to invest in the development of these programs. So they need to look regionally. They have to put together advisory boards that include some of these regional players. And then once you get that team together, it's very interesting to watch the dynamic, because the community colleges then can be much more, they'll tell you what guidelines they have to work within, and then how you can circumvent, or perhaps there's another offering or another group or organization they can work with to help you meet the goal. But at the end of the day, they want to recruit students, bringing them, they want to give them background and knowledge and education that they can then go out and get gainful employment. So you'll find when you work together as a group and a little more regionally based, it does make a difference.
Shane, what are your thoughts on this workforce question?
I want to tap in real quick to what Deb said. She mentioned the 5 colleges that she's worked with. At Electricom, I've had no less than 5 other colleges and tech schools reach out requesting curriculum advice, partnership, that want to get into this segment that are not here yet. So I think that the education realm in general is pivoting to this as a need, but they don't have the understanding of what truly that curriculum looks like. So I think the need is out there, and they are looking for those benchmark partners. So just off on that real quick. When we talk about wage.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So we are competing. Nowadays we're competing with McDonald's and Walmart in a lot of cases. It's tough. Where we have placed ourselves is, we have a career opportunity. You may start at a similar wage to a McDonald's, Walmart on down the road, but through the apprenticeship program, we have very structured wage increases. We pay a premium for a CDL license. We pay a premium for this. So what we've advertised to our students that we're recruiting is, you may start at X, but within 2 years, you're here. Within 3 years, we're looking at your potential foreman position, which comes with other perks. And very quickly, you're in a position making very strong income without the college debt, without that. So I think that's one advertising point that we've had with marketing for students. The other is, we have to look at students who don't want the monotonous. I came from a factory. I put 8,000 widgets on a day. I was so sick and tired of putting widgets on. I wanted something different. We offer a career where they can do something different every day. They can be out in the environment. They can enjoy change. So I think we have to look at and sell what we offer outside of a McDonald's, Walmart, et cetera.
Mhm. Others who want to talk about the wages issue, and particularly with inflation being where it is right now. I mean, is that are people's inflation expectations high for a long time, or how do employers and those who are in the midst of this extensive broadband build out because of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, how are they coping with what appears to the supplier side a really rapid increases in labor costs? Silence. I gather most of you are thinking long-term issues as opposed to short term, right? But I do want to just take the pulse of what's the need to raise wages? Is it important to do it, or are there other things more important for the sake of growing your workforce and getting people who will stick with you for a long time? Kelly, what are your thoughts on that?
I can just very pragmatically, I think, and everyone hates to talk about wages, but I don't, because it is the reality. Is 5 years ago, the entry starting wage was $16 an hour. Now it's $20 an hour minimum, and that's within the last 4 or 5 years. The other thing is, and it's kind of what Shane was saying, is you have to really not sell them on what they make now, but what they'll make a year from now, 5 years from now, et cetera. And what we found very effective is we go through a lot of training, a lot of integration, but we bring guys and gals that are in the program back in and say, here's where I started, here's where I am now. You have to give them real examples of that career progression, and they've got to be part of doing something meaningful or worthwhile, which I think this national infrastructure bill is. So a lot of it is, it can't just be wage focused. It's an important stake, but it's not the only stake. So we just had a discussion with my COO today that a greeter in an Apple store was making $28 an hour. We didn't believe him, and he brought it in, and he's making $28 an hour. So that's great if that's what you want to do, but you want to get people into saying that you can have a career. And I think the last thing I'll say is that we're starting to roll out a program where we're saying in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, you could be your own small business owner. You could be a subcontractor through us. You could be an entrepreneur. And TIRAP did something 5 years ago that I think should be shared, distributed. And Deb probably still has it, it's been updated, but it's that career ladder matrix. We have to show that to people. It's not where you are, but where you can be. And that's got to be the discussions. But I think the wages themselves have seen a 20 to 30% minimum increase in literally the last 2 or 3 years. And employers are shocked to dealing with that. And then that's a big thing you have to adjust, but you have to make sure you paint the whole picture. That's
right.
Yeah. And on, my poster child that I like to talk about is Ivan Seidenberg. I mean, he started the manholes, splicing,
Right.
and then he ended up running Verizon as the CEO for how many years? So, I mean, the thing about telco is that there's so many opportunities here. You don't have to be in the field being a fiber optic technician, your entire career. I mean, I was an analyst at Gartner for 21 years. I covered all this broadband technology. You could be sales, marketing. I mean, it's endless.
Yeah, no, it's wide ranging. We don't have a hard cutoff right at the hour. We like to be respectful of your time, but we'll go for just a few more minutes. I do want to get everyone's thoughts on this question. Feel free to wrap in and anything else you'd like to add. Tom Rolfs asks, to any of the panelists, please fast forward to the year 2030 when most of the nationwide fiber construction has been completed. How and where will these newly trained fiber technicians transition to other employment, e.g. retooling or for reabsorption into the workforce? Love your thoughts on that, as well as other thoughts on these questions we've talked about. Let's go to Eric.
Sure. So I'll address both the previous discussion point and this question. What we're focused on in Ohio is building out career pathways so that individuals can understand what the different paths there are for them to move up in the industry, what the education and training requirements are, how many years of experience, that kind of thing, so they can see the growth. And so it's really about creating a career ladder. And I think that's where the impressive wage growth can come into versus just solely looking at that entry level wage. So that's just piece number one on the previous question. Regarding the question as far as 2030 comes, in Ohio, we're focused on making sure the population in the state realizes that the days of having a 30, 40-year career in one just kind of position or related positions is pretty much over. We're trying to get Ohioans to understand that you're going to have to be reskilling, upskilling your entire career. Doesn't matter if you're blue collar or white collar. And so I can't speak direct. I'm not an industry person, so I can't speak directly to what fiber is going to look like in 2030. But from a public policy standpoint, we're going to make sure every Ohioan that is a fiber tech will have the opportunities to reskill and upskill to move into what's next. And that's just from the state's perspective.
And Ohio has a long tradition. I know this from covering the banking industry years ago, a long tradition of innovation. I mean, Ohio has been the Silicon Valley of the early American frontier. And I'm really, again, pleased that we could have the governor's office representing us here on this discussion, Eric, and really, good luck to everything you're doing on this front. Let's hear from others on this point about where do the broadband workers go after this big build out is completed.
Drew, I just have one quick point is that we don't call them fiber technicians. We call them national infrastructure technicians. And that career path is not in the vertical. In our world, they may end up as a EV, clean energy, et cetera.
Right.
So it's all about being a technician in the infrastructure space, not pinned to one particular sector. So that's my point of what we're trying to do.
Does the training that TIRAP and other organizations are doing, does that transfer to new infrastructure fields like electronic vehicles?
Yep. Listen, 80% of EV installation is civil work. So across the board, an infrastructure technician has to be a good technician, a good supervisor, a good project manager. And I think the EV is the future, or clean energy. So as we do the fiber, it's all part of the clean economy. And so I think we've avoided calling them anything other than a national infrastructure technician to give them that flexibility to evolve their career.
Wonderful. Let's hear from Debbie, Deb, and Shane. We'll give Shane you the last word here, but Debbie and Deb, what thoughts do you have on this question of retraining and retooling these infrastructure workers?
Yeah, so I said in the beginning of my spiel that there are, tons of opportunities. So, I mean, it doesn't, the question that comes up when I talk to colleges or other programs is, is this a once and done? And the answer to that is no, because those people will end up going into, they could go into the vendor world. They could go into the service provider themselves. There's outside plant management. To Eric's point, they can grow as they can grow their career, starting at, the entry level and then work their way up to outside plant engineers. They could be, designers. They could be installer, outside plant installers, or whatever, managers. There's all kinds of opportunities that go beyond just this entry level type work.
Deb,
and WIA and the TIRAP, honestly, the I in TIRAP is industry. We started, we got our roots, and it was safety driven, and it was for those workers that were at height. But we recognize that there's a great opportunity to expand the number of occupations and to get in and not only build out for the 14, 15 that I have and put career paths in. There are just an incredible amount of even management positions that would be well suited to develop through an apprenticeship program. So we recognize that at WIA, and it's on our plan for growth to increase the number of occupations that the industry needs overall.
Shane, we'll give you the last word for our discussion today.
I will say, in response to that, the EV power charging station, the EV industry is the future. We're already looking at it as a company ourselves. With having to rebuild the power grid, you also have to rebuild and build out the wireless infrastructure grid. So I think there'll be a lot of growth that we don't see today in 2030. But I'll also say that it wasn't that many years ago that wireless or fiber wasn't a thing. We were still using copper. So by 2030, there may be the next widget that is not fiber optic. And these technicians, I think, can roll into that next widget in terms of communication.
Well, that will have to be the last word. We thank you to our audience for sticking with us for this slightly extended version. As a reminder, next Wednesday, November 9th at 12 noon, what to expect at Digital Infrastructure Investment, Washington, with the moderators of the panels that will take place on the 17th. On the 16th, 2 weeks from today, how to value your fiber company. And then don't forget the next day in person at Clyde's of Gallery Place, register for Digital Infrastructure Investment, Washington. On behalf of Patrick Halley, our keynote speaker with Wireless Infrastructure Association, and our speakers, Debbie Kish, Deb Bennett, Eric Leach, Shane Matthews, and Kelly Dunn. I'm Drew Clark with Broadband Breakfast. We'll see you next Wednesday. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.